Welcome back, everybody. Today I want to revisit surface adjustments and really demonstrate how having a few pads in your possession can have a major impact on your game. I'll continue to remind people that surface has 70% of the ball reaction. 30% is left to the core dynamics. And if you understand just even the slightest of physics, it shouldn't be hard to imagine that within a normal range of layout, the impact of layout itself is maybe 5%. I'm here to tell you, stop worrying about layout. You can easily change way more than 5% with surface changes. In fact, you can make extremely fine to coarse adjustments with surface manipulations alone. In other words, you can go as much as 50% or as little as 2 to 5%, let's say. Now, really hang around and pay close attention. Don't skim over this. There are a few interesting nuggets that will really educate you on surface manipulation. There's so much more, but this is literally and figuratively scratching the surface. All right, so let's get into the video portion. We're on a normal fresh house shot that we know plays a little slicker, not much of a defined track yet since it's a pretty new installation. And here are some baseline shots with the Storm the Road with basically a factory surface lane that's been lane shined, so a little scuff that's been lane shined, thrown maybe 6 to 8 games. I experiment to find the line, and yeah, there it is, around 11 to 6. Here's Tyler, and he quickly finds it, say 16 to 5. So now we have our baseline and what you basically get with the ball out of the box. Now we then move on to the 5000D True Cut pad by hand. Theoretically, the delta, if any, should be minimal. First, with Tyler, you can see it has made a bit of a difference. He actually made a 2-to-1 move, putting the ball around 18 to 6. This was a surprisingly effective adjustment for him. Now I give it a go and I find identical reaction to my first shot going 11 to 6. So far, we're starting to see some separation of mild surfaces between our rev rates. We both have a pretty high track and around 60 degrees axis rotation. So given we use the mild surface, we jump to 3000 True Cut by hand, and now you can see that I can still play it the same line, but boy did it overdrive. So no deflection through the pins, telling you it's reading a touch earlier now. I move 2 boards with my feet and you see that the reaction is just about there. So still pretty close, but certainly impactful enough to cause a move. By the way, this could be a similar delta to having, say, a 3 versus a 5-inch pin, and more on that later. Next is Tyler with the 3000 grit. And can you guess what he sees? Oh, he still has a shot in the original spot, but now it's also driving hard. So he makes another 2-in-1, putting him pretty close to the 4th arrow now. The angle's pretty open. Next we move to 2000, and it starts to get interesting here. There's a clear change in ball motion now for Tyler. It's now become noticeably earlier, and a bigger move is required to get it down lane to the break point. He has to make another 2-to-1 move, but now the ball requires so much angle through the fronts. But with that surface, it no longer has the kind of same energy storage to make it back to the pocket effectively. He tries to move the break point in to catch more oil, and it strikes, but barely. And one more move, he finds it, but it's finicky now. For me, I didn't have to generate more angle. It just got a little smoother overall. So I may have gained a bit of traction, but lost some angle. So it wasn't hugely different, but to be honest, it was kind of meh for me with this surface. Now we move on to 1500 grit. For me, there is an instant noticeable difference in traction. The ball went from that sort of occasional meh look to a definitive traction look. I didn't lose back end motion. The earlier motion just meant a more obviously definitive move you could see, and this surface made the ball much more round and usable for me. From the left side, combating the lack of any track at all is important. For Tyler, he quickly found that this was pretty much the same as the 2000. Difference here is he's righty, he's pretty deep in the oil, but we're starting to again see that separation now in terms of the benefit of surface between our rev rates and side of the lane we're playing. And this, continues to become even more obvious when we go to 1000 grit. Now Tyler has turned to essentially being unhappy with the motion. It's so aggressive, so he has to try harder to get it down lane or go deeper both yield the same issue. Loss of angle, and while he carried, it's not really a great consistent look. It's just way too much surface now. My look, on the other hand, with 1,000 was gorgeous, really comfortable, but had traction, wasn't lazy down lane. Excellent drive, a little deeper, but it looked great. So now I quickly move into the 500 grit, and again, remember this is by hand, and again, it looks spectacular. Just a little more diggy, but clearly for me, ball reaction improved substantially with the road with some deep surface. For Tyler, on the other hand, the 500 now just beyond the point of no return. He can get to the pocket no problem, but left a 10 pin 3 or 4 times. Just not really having the drive anymore with how deep he has to get with how much surface it has. Okay, so I hope you stuck around so far, as I really want to tackle a few more nuggets. For the righty and higher rev, the sweet spot for him was around 3,000 grit. For the lefty, sort of tweener stroker, it was around 1,000 grit. That seems to work. I just want you to think about that on a curve. Additionally, after about 6 balls from my side, the left side, with 500 to 1,000 grit, the shot was done. The road became really lazy and just depleted energy. So there's no question that you have to consider what happens when you use surface. You have to make adjustments to, ball down, let's say, right, as the game progresses. Another really great nugget we wanted to share here was what happened when we had the road at 500 and then hit it with 2,000 on top of that. And that looked very different from a ball that we started with shine and took down to 2,000. So working up from a lower grit yielded a much smoother overall reaction. So now Tyler was able to actually move quite a bit back to the right and have an overall rounder but more reliable look to the pocket. And he no longer had to cover lots of boards but can take advantage of the traction 2,000 grit had to offer. So the point I'm making here is look how different, quote, 2,000 grit, a final 2,000 grit can be depending on how you arrive there. And I'm not particularly worried about laser scanning the ball, right? I mean, as you know, what we're doing here simulates what you would do at the lanes by hand. So you don't need a spinner even. With that said, this is exactly why I started with the idea that you don't need to worry about layouts. Think of how much we changed the ball reaction with surface, even arriving at the same surface through a different methodology. And with these various surface methodologies, you can easily manipulate ball motion, and this is no better example. And again, this particular example really highlights and almost diminishes the criticality of relying on layouts. So rather than feeling like, oh, I hate this ball, I'm going to go back to my pro shop and try to get it relayed out to move the pin by an inch or so, you can actually go back to your pro shop and work on surface changes first and see if you like what you see then. Well, thanks for watching. I hope you stayed around to really learn what's possible. We're glad to be able to continue putting out some educational material for the bowling community. Please support us by subscribing, sending us super thanks, sharing the video, or joining Patreon. See you in one of our next videos.